if there's anything like, just as an introductory, like, what is a hobby that you like to do? It could be football.
I like many hobbies. Yeah, general exploring. I like doing some urbex stuff. Anything. When my pain in my back is good, I like running and football, reading, board games. A little bit of. I like to dabble around.
Sorry, what is urbex?
Urbex, like exploring abandoned buildings. And
You
like
just
abandoned
do that?
areas, yeah. Especially in Sheffield, there's some nice areas. If you know, I've got some friends who are climbers, and they have ropes as well, so you can get in to some good places.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not about football at all. It's just I love abandoned buildings. I'm obsessed with them. It's a complete aside. I'm not going to go into it. I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Okay, I guess we can go into the football, which is obviously the point.
Yeah.
Well, first thing first, how long have you played football for?
I've played football on and off since I was about 9, so about... God, I'm 31 now. However many years that is. 21, 22.
Some years.
A lot of years,
Cool.
yeah.
How'd you get into it?
It was at primary school. I played on the in the playground, but like I don't really know why, because none of my family were interested in football at all, or sporty. I think I just saw the boys doing it, and I was like, I want to play football and be active. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you, at that point, I mean, I'm guessing that was like just informal stuff. Was it even teams at all? But if it was teams, was it like mixed or?
Yeah, there was the school team, the primary school team, and that was mixed. And at the time, I was the only girl playing for about a year. So it was mixed, but not very mixed at all. And it was quite hostile. Some of the boys were like very not okay with the fact you were playing with them. And then someone new moved to the school and she started playing. So then there was 2 of us, which is a little bit better. Yeah. And then from then, when I moved to like a Sunday league team, maybe the same year or the year after, like 9 or 10, that was a girls only team. I think maybe the first half of the season I played was mixed, and then it went to a girls only team 7-a-side. And then I just played on like single sex team for like up until I was about 25, and then switched, played in some mixed gender teams, which were predominantly, as far as I'm aware, men, and then me, and then some women, and then now the women on a binary group, which is who I play with.
Sorry, so that was pretty much just like, because you mentioned there were like tiny breaks in that, or was that just in terms of like finding a new team, or was it like not being sure where you wanted to play, or like? Yeah,
it's mixed. Some of the breaks were quite long. So there's a break where I was at university. I didn't play for 3 years. I played maybe 1 match with the Rock Society team, but apart from that, I didn't play any football, and I really missed it. It was kind of, I fell out of like having friends because I'd moved city to play with, and also maybe not feeling confident enough to join a university team, not really realising that like you could unless you were doing a sport degree. I think a lot of my friends were not very sporty, so I think it didn't really fit in. And then other breaks I've had have been for like surgeries on my back, or like because my sciatic pain has been too bad to play, or various reasons. Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, just to clarify about the space and things. Can you tell me a bit about the team that you play on right now?
Yeah. So they're it's like a casual kick around session. Occasionally they do little mini tournaments. We've played against a team in Manchester and had little tournaments, some little local teams. It's a women and non-binary session, and I was always a bit nervous when I see things like that. It's like, well, what do you mean by non-binary? Because sometimes people say women are non-binary, but they expect you to present in a very certain way, and if they perceive you to be you know what I mean? People expect that unless you're like super androgynous, then you must identify as like a trans man. And I was a bit nervous going in case they were like, well, you're not an obvious non-binary person. But it's really good, really, really good, and they're really friendly. Called Steel Athletic.
They're Sheffield based.
Yeah, they're Sheffield based, and it's just like once a week at the community centre, and we play games and stuff. We're trying to reach out to more teams to play, and have more like 11-a-side matches and things. It's also mixed ability, which is really nice. Instead of it just being like, they focus a lot on, if you've never played before, you can come and it's no one's gonna be like, you've done that wrong, or like, pass me the ball, or like you're supposed to like let everyone have a fair go, which I really like. It's just really relaxed. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna ask if it was 11-a-side or if it's.
Yeah, it's like, however many people sign up that week, we maybe do 6 or 7-a-side, and if they get like 20 people, we'll just rotate and have like 10-minute matches, and then sometimes maybe like once a month we'll have like a big long 2-hour session on a Sunday, and just again maybe just same amount of people but for longer.
So how long have you played for this team?
About 1.5 years. Yeah.
Nice. In terms of, because you mentioned that you were reaching out to play against other teams, I'm assuming. Is that like trying to figure out what kind of leagues you could belong in, or trying to like make a new league, or just structurally how?
I don't know what the overall aim is with the committee. I'm not on the committee, but I know that to begin with, it's just a very like, we'd like to meet other people who are doing similar things to us, and just network a bit and get more people to like have some matches. I know there's a league in Manchester where we could potentially play, and I think a league in Rotherham that they're trying to start, or is a thing. I don't know if we'll be able to get enough regular people for a league thing. There's a league thing starting in summer, apparently, in Sheffield on a Friday, which is going to be with a team called Football for Food Banks. Is also a big Sheffield thing that is a mixed, I've not played with them, but is a mixed gender thing. Well, they have a men's and they have a women and mixed gender team, and they're starting like a regular thing in summer, but I don't think I'll be able to play because a Friday is difficult.
Do you know whether that other team, like Football for Food Banks, do you know whether they have a trans-inclusive policy?
I think they do. I'm not sure. I wouldn't like to completely speak on behalf of them, but I know trans people have played with them. I don't know what it is, and I find this a lot with non-binary inclusion, or I guess with anyone. So like, I get the impression a lot if I'm approaching teams or talking about playing with anyone really, that they'll presume I want to play with the men and be like, oh yeah, that's great, you take testosterone, you're like living in this world as a man, therefore you'll want to play on the men's team. And I'd be like, I personally would not. I'd rather play on a predominantly women or like very mixed gender team, like any day. There's always like a presumption around it. And so some teams are trans inclusive because they'll be like, yeah, if you're on testosterone, of course you can play with the men. I'm like, well, no, I'd like to play on the other team, but can I still do that if I have testosterone? And I think because They are not in a FA run league. You probably can, but yeah.
There's always a. I mean, I'm saying I'm guessing. I'm like, this is also my experience because it's literally fucking this. That's the reason we're doing this. No, just the question always of being like, okay, I need to now figure out all the ins and outs of how this works, just in case it turns out that regardless of what they may or may not have said, they're actually not at all inclusive. I mean, not at all inclusive, but like not as inclusive as they think they are, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting with you I mean, I've obviously spoken with a fair few different people. Some are, I think actually most people I've spoken to have been on T. And I think for NB people, the majority of them have been like, oh, I like being in women's football spaces, rather than wanting to try and be shoved into a men's football space. So. Yeah. With all that lead up, can you tell me a little bit about what is about women's football spaces that you, I guess, maybe prefer as a strong, well, maybe not, actually. What is it about them that you, I mean, what about those spaces that you think is better?
I think on the whole, and this is part generalising and part just what I've experienced personally, I've found it easier to get on with people in those spaces, and almost easier to talk to people in that spaces. And it might be because I'm approaching it from a level of being comfortable, and therefore I'm talking to people more than in perhaps a more men's team where I'm perhaps a bit nervous of what do they think of me or whatever. But I think on the whole, more open and chattier and friendlier, and then also the ones I've played for anyway are I don't know, often less physical, but not always, of course, but often. I don't really like being bashed around. I don't know. And then yeah. And often, again, I find that my level of ability with football tends to not match the men's teams that I've played with. And that obviously wouldn't be the same for everyone. But I feel like often if I'm playing in a men's team, I'll be one of the less good players there. And then I'll just be like, oh, I'm rubbish because they can fucking, sorry, I was swearing. Can you swear?
Yeah, go for it.
They'll blast a ball. In no way I cannot do that. And then you'll get that as well with women's and other mixed teams, but it'll just be more variation and a greater variety of types of play, I think. Yeah.
I've heard of a lot of both women's spaces and women's non-binary people's spaces, and spaces that maybe have started out as women's teams but then have become more inclusive because that's the way things are going and they've just been responding to this fact, that they tend to build spaces often that are for mixed abilities. But I don't know if I've ever, this may be a bit biased as well because I haven't actually spoken to any cis men for obvious reasons, but I'm I don't know whether that sort of same thing is as encoded into predominantly cis men's football, because I wonder if the ethos on some level is also a bit different.
Yeah, this was a problem with the one I went to. I went there on and off for about a year, and what drew me to it initially was they were all quite lefty guys politically and very welcoming compared to other spaces, and it was advertised, or they do advertise it as mixed ability, or they did at the time, but it wasn't really mixed ability because it was predominantly a bunch of people who already knew each other, who were already at a quite high level, and that's quite intimidating because I brought a couple of friends with me, two women who had played a bit, but then as soon as you get there you're like, oh, this is not a mixed ability, this is okay, anyone can come, but will you actually feel welcome? And I found that they would give me longer on the ball and stuff, which I know some people would find like condescending, but I quite appreciated and things like that. But the two people I brought didn't go back because they were like, it doesn't feel mixed ability. So I think the committee there, I do remember them saying they were trying to figure out how to attract a wider variety, and they were talking about maybe having half of the session that's more like a beginner level kick around, and then the other side like a more advanced level kick around. And I'm not sure what they're doing at the moment because I've not been for a couple of years or so. Yeah.
You've got a space that you enjoy. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So you went to that other team. That was a men's team, or that was supposed to be a mixed gender team?
It's supposed to be a mixed gender team, and just I guess you wouldn't. I guess it was mainly men. I guess you don't know for sure, but like I think it was mainly men, and I guess probably cisgender men, but again.
No, you can't. No, but yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe in terms of this is going to be more of a muse than a question, so feel free to jump on. But I feel like a lot of the stuff that we're not going to talk about because it's bullshit that other people in the mainstream maybe are saying seems to be really focused on like, oh, trans people are trying to come into our spaces, and I'm like, well, actually, maybe the spaces that we're building and what we're offering to spaces is much better than what's already there, and maybe you should be asking us about what spaces ought to be looking like, rather than trying to test us to make sure that we are acceptable for spaces in whatever way that. I don't know, it's something that I've noticed a lot of times, that like the ethos of when you're making something trans inclusive, you're not thinking only about trans people, and you're not affecting only trans people, you're affecting everybody in that space, to think about things like body positivity and community, and not policing what bodies are allowed to look like and how good bodies are allowed to be. That's more of amusing than actually a question. But I guess off the back of that, I could actually ask you, like, if we were to acknowledge that there is this stuff that's being said that is inaccurate and stupid and mean-spirited, what do you think that trans people actually add to a space, and what, in terms of like maybe an ethos of trans inclusivity, could, I guess, what is it that people ought to be learning from trans people rather than trying to like police trans people?
I think in a way, this is dodging the question a bit, that you almost, it doesn't have to be a learning point because it should just be like, it shouldn't be that trans people are adding XYZ to enrich an area just to be able to play a sport. It should just be like, alright, these people should be able to play, so we're gonna make it so they can play. I guess within that reasoning there would be learning happening, but it would be nice to think like, oh, it can just happen anyway, sort of thing. And I guess on like a more straightforward level, it would help teams see that like people can play against people of all shapes and sizes and abilities without it being like, well, shapes and sizes predominantly, without it being an issue. But then I said I prefer playing not with the cisgenders men's because of...
Well, I can follow up on that in a moment if you want.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No, I really like what you were saying about, I really like the... Stop slapping things. I really like what you're saying as a whole, but I think you're very, very correct about like people shouldn't have to prove themselves worthy, basically, in order, or like, you know, a person should be allowed to play because they're a person who wants to play.
Yeah.
That can kind of be the full stop of it. I think that's a very succinct like.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be like going to a team and then thinking, oh, well, this person's coming on this team, what can we learn from, what can we gain from them? I just want to be able to go on the team and then not be really, not be considered, but that just be super normal and super like fine. Yeah.
I will follow up on where you left off on the last bit, because I mean, just because we're talking about space building and the like, it doesn't mean that all spaces are created equal at the moment. I mean, like, I think it's very fair to point out that, you know, if we're looking even just like at professional football, for example, like professional league football, like men's football, doesn't even have out gay players. So why would one feel? And then you've got the whole like fan culture around that. So why would one necessarily feel like that's the space one might be drawn to when there's a lot of unlearning to do in that space? But having said that, I know that you've already talked about the team that you are on, but in a sort of broad sense, what do you think might be the ideal way of creating teams right now? And then maybe if, say, we had like a forward trajectory that just went better and better, and so we lived in a really great society, equal society in like 50 years.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think the team setups might look like then? Would it be that there are only mixed gender teams maybe, or would it be that there are like a ton of different options, like if you would prefer to just play with women, or you would prefer to play on a mixed team or on a trans team, or so I'm throwing a bunch of examples at you, so like now and then in the future.
Okay. Ultimately, I would like to see a breakdown of it being led by gender, so that it was just mixed gender football, and you could break it down on ability and just have it in that way, like some other sports might do. I think the issue with unless society has a huge shift in their opinion on trans people, which may be in the far future, but if we have I'd rather play with women, you would always get the people who are going to be exclusionary and be sort of policing who is a woman, perhaps. Whereas if it was completely broken down to mixed gender, that shouldn't happen. And then for now, I think there's a lot of battles, because I think I'd really like to see, well, in a medium term, more league football for more people, more types of people, because that's one thing I really miss, like actual league that isn't just a 5-a-side league, but like a 11-a-side, like a Sunday league style thing, where it's like, but you can play and it doesn't matter. Yeah, so that would be, I guess, in the interim, like more options, whether that was an additional league to the existing leagues. Might be okay. Ideally, it would just be that existing leagues branch out and do things like you saying, where there's perhaps teams that have said we're a women's team, and then things have changed and they're like, actually, okay, we're going to broaden it out a bit more. If existing leagues decided they could broaden it out a bit more, that would be good. But at the moment, I'm really liking, like, I just noticed it across the country, or mainly in the north, because that's where I'm paying attention to, but like the popping up over the past 5 years of like these football spaces which are like either for trans people, or it's mixed, or just more than there was 10 years ago. And that feels really good, because at one point there was just no options. So unless you knew a lot of people that you could just play with informally at the park, you couldn't really play at all. So in the very, very near future, I think just lots more groups deciding to do their own thing from a grassroots level, and then hopefully pressuring leagues to expand who's playing, who's allowed to play, and additional leagues, and then the abolition of the gender binary in football.
Yeah. No, I know that I put you it's putting you a lot on the spot and being like, all right, solve this.
Yeah.
It's more that I'm just I'm interested in like in the ways that it can be broken down in lots of different ways, because I think it's not a question of who belongs in what space so much as it is like, well, do we maybe have the right kinds of spaces right now or something like that. Like it's like I feel like the question that I am interested in, and I'm trying not to lead you or anyone else I've talked to in, but like is that I'm like, oh, it seems like what's actually important is maybe slightly to the left of what is happening in the mainstream conversation, and so this is why I put you on the spot. So thank you for doing that. Just taking it back, because actually I was going to ask you about that earlier and then I got distracted by football ethos, which is also very interesting. What position do you play?
I like to play more like a midfield position. I like to play on a wing, but I never get placed on a wing if I'm playing on a team, which I always get. In the past, I've always been placed like as centre mid. But I quite like doing lots of running and lots of long passes. So anything where I can do that. And sometimes people put me up front because they think I can score, but then it comes down to it and not so much.
Fair enough. I get very stressed out playing, so I just purely by my own sense of being end up in defense. I think I've tried it where it will just be like, all right, you want to, like we'll try lots of different things, and then people have a tendency to like move further forwards, and I'm like,
you're pulling it back.
Come, somebody. All right, I guess it's me. So yeah, it's I'm honest midfielder, because I've had people be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll be defense, and I'll be like, you're not being defense right now. I think I'm way too much under control freak. And then like I don't want to be a goalie because I'd feel sad if I was the person who let it.
I used to be a goalie when I was a kid, and we played in the small goals. So for about 5 years I played in goal. But I think that was mainly because I was always quite tall compared to the majority of other people, and so filled the majority of the net.
I mean,
that
that
helps.
I was gonna say that's a pretty good criteria.
As soon as it got to like age 17 with full size nets, I stopped being a goalie.
Actually, just a quick aside, have you played any other sports?
Yeah, I like in a team. I briefly played a bit of handball.
Oh, no.
We a few of my friends and I, we left one football team, and in the interim joined a handball team, but we didn't play any full matches. I do a lot of like variety of different sports, like super casually, because I help run a trans sports group in Sheffield. So we sometimes do swimming and tennis and climbing and bouldering and stuff like that. So I'd like dabble, but football's the only one where it's been like, as far as I can remember, where that's been like a regular thing. I tried rugby and that wasn't for me at all.
Yeah, I guess off the back of what you were saying, like, what is it you think about football that draws you in?
It's a beautiful game, isn't it? Just to be really cliche, it's really simple. It's so accessible to play anywhere. You don't need a lot. I think it was always the sport growing up that was the sport that was played. Nobody played any other sport really. And I think it was the only sport really I could have played in my town. I doubt there was like girls other sports really in like the late 90s. And what draws me to it now is because I've played it for so long, you get to a point where it's so like natural. You can just go on without thinking, and just run around a lot.
Fair enough. I feel I've like asked people this question and everybody's been really wholesome. Just
Yeah,
like you.
all the cliches I feel like are true, and I think that like it's just like it's just nice.
Oh,
Just makes me feel like that.
I'm glad. I'm really glad. That's what it should be doing. Otherwise, I feel like otherwise we're talking about the wrong sport. The trans sports club.
Yeah.
You run that or?
Yeah, I'm on the committee for it. So it's called TransActive, and it's been running since 2014 in Sheffield, and we get funded by the National Lottery, and we mainly put on weekly swimming sessions. We book out a little small pool in Sheffield, and we've been doing that for many years, and then we also do a couple of other activities a month, sometimes like walks or kayaking or badminton, tennis. We try and like get it so people who maybe don't try sport usually can come, so they're all sort of very beginnery style sessions or aim to. Yeah, it's really good.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just like, oh no.
I'm possibly moving to Leeds at the end of the year, and I was thinking I need to delve around to see if there's anything like that, because if there isn't, I would like to create that.
I think so. I've lived in. I'm quite a slow. I very, very slowly learn things around where I live. So I've lived in Leeds for about a year. I think there is something like that. As in, I've been invited to something that was like similar, like booked out a pool and stuff. I couldn't go because timing, but so I think there is something, but I'm not sure what. I know just in terms of football that there's a women non-binaries team, and a friend of mine's trying to set up a trans team. So like
we have the same
across.
friend, because I have a friend in Leeds who's trying to set up a trans.
Is it Frank?
Yeah.
It's Frank.
I knew Frank when he played in Sheffield.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course, because Frank lived in Sheffield for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Frank was actually. I met him because of this project. He was like the first person I talked to.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, he's lovely. It's a very small world.
It is.
I was like, I think the world of like anybody under the transmasculine umbrella who plays football specifically is probably not like the biggest.
Yeah, because I know someone in Manchester you spoke to as well. So I feel like
That's actually really I'm interested because like obviously I spoke to Frank first. I spoke to Frank last year before I had funding. As partially to do like a proof of concept for the actual bid. But then after that, obviously, I went and I talked to a bunch of people in London. So actually, this is the first day that I've started talking to the people that I'm going to be talking to around up here. So I guess, what do you think about like, I don't know how long you lived up north your whole life? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, do you think that there is might be a very broad, might be a very limited question, I'm not sure. But do you think that there is sort of support happening up here for building football teams that are trans inclusive? This is also like up here, like it's so broad. It's a big area.
I honestly don't know, and it's also difficult because I can't conceptually compare it to down south because I've not got a clue what's happening down south. But I think, just going off the funding that TransActive get from the National Lottery, I would say that there is scope for things to be funded, but whether it's always difficult, I think, in trans environments for people to like put the energy into doing something, because often it is like a lengthy battle and takes a lot of work to set things up, and I think trans people are often hit with a multitude of other like difficulties or like lack of energies because of the world we live in. So I think the energy to set things up probably affects it a lot. I presume there could be more to be done to set things up. Yeah.
I mean, it feels like there's more happening in the last couple of years than maybe was happening before. I'm saying that quite cautiously because obviously I wasn't up here a couple of years ago, and I mean, COVID aside, like pre-COVID, I was not in a space where I was confident enough to try and join sports teams as a general. So, but it feels like just based on when I started this project and was basically sort of like putting out feelers, that there is more happening in these last couple of years than maybe before. It's very, very vague because I'm like, I don't want to say that people weren't doing shit before.
I remember, so like maybe like 2017 I tried to start a trans non-binary football in Sheffield, but I was doing it from a super perhaps naive place. I was just doing it completely off my own back, so I didn't really know where to start, so I bought a bunch of stuff and tried to set it up, but I didn't have a car, so it was difficult to like get to a playing field that people could go to, and then one that had lights to play in the evening, and then to try and get people interested in playing football. I know like some sporty trans people, but a lot of those were playing other sports and weren't interested in football, and then eventually it sort of petered off. So perhaps there's people trying but just need more support or more networks, need to know more people, and then it could gain momentum. Perhaps I didn't have a clue, but maybe if I had links with other people that were doing similar stuff, like in Manchester, in Leeds, in Liverpool, like maybe that would have helped improve things.
Northern Translink.
Yeah, Northern Translink.
That'd be cool. And I know that you kind of said that they didn't necessarily work out that time, but now you are obviously on the committee for like a trans sports club. So do you have any advice, I guess, to building let's broaden it out a little bit, just like a sports space for trans people? Like if you're like, oh, I really wish that I could play X sport with other trans people, and I really want to build that space somehow from a grassroots level. Do you have any advice?
I feel like you may have to change what sport you want to play, in a way, because sometimes with TransActive I'm like, oh, it'd be really good to get us all to go and do a skateboarding session, but then when it actually comes to it, it's about what other people want to do in the area, so you kind of have to think, is there a bunch of stuff is there enough interest in my area for this, or like, and just I think things take probably a lot longer to build, and social media plays a big part, I think, in helping it along, and we managed to get some people on board on our committee who were cis people, but had experience of being on a board, just to help things along the way. Like we had a committee, and I wasn't one of the founding members, but we had somebody on the committee who could sort of help a bit, like from an outside perspective, be like, I know stuff about grants, so perhaps you could do this, and just be there as like a bit of support was really useful. And you got to also kind of just got to try, and you can do it really informally as well. It doesn't have to be like hiring out the local pool, and it costs a lot of money. You can sort of try and just build small and see if there's an appetite for it, and if it doesn't gain momentum into a big group, that's runs for years and things like that, you could at least meet other like-minded people who you can play sports with and do stuff with, which is still a win, really.
I think there's something very interesting about spaces that don't necessarily last, but were important. A, were important while they did last, and B, maybe led to some other things as well. So yeah, I think there's. I do this where it's like, oh, this thing has to be good and perfect and the best thing ever that has been created that just, I don't know, changes, the face of, I haven't tried to make a sports team, but like changes the face of sports and something like that, and you're like, actually, maybe what you want to do is just want to meet some other people.
Yeah.
Just want to like do a tiny little shift in the grand scheme of whether or not there was a sports team for a hot second. This is like a getting a sense of I get not timeline as such because I'm not necessarily that interested in things being linear, but how many teams have you played on?
7 teams. 7 teams, including like school teams and kick around session teams. Yeah.
Those count.
Yeah, 7. I remember playing on the school football. In year 7, playing on me and my friend would play with like a plastic bottle because you weren't allowed footballs, and we were just like, and also we didn't feel comfortable asking the people who did play football if we could join them, so we were like, we'll just use this bottle and play football every playtime.
There's something very interesting about, I mean, also because you were saying before, like, the thing about football is that it doesn't take that much. I mean, like, there's versions of it that are less fun, maybe, than, like, actually playing with a proper ball on a proper field. But if you want to play football, you can find ways to play football. I think that's something that's very interesting about that as a sport.
Yeah.
It really only requires something that resembles a ball in some way.
And you can play by yourself.
And
Like, I think it's a good thing, because all the time that I wasn't playing with other people, I'd still, like, when I went home to my parents' house, they've got a big backyard. I'd always play by myself, even when I wasn't playing with a team. So, yeah, it's a good draw.
It's good. It's also just me hyping up football. Like, I go to people's houses and I'm like, isn't football great?
Like, yes.
It's like, yes, because we're talking about football because we enjoy football, which is what this whole thing is. That's the point. Do you have any anecdotes of anything that you are like, oh, this was really funny, or this was really interesting, or this taught me something?
Oh.
Football related.
Yeah, of course. I remember just a good moment from when I was a kid playing football, but I don't know if it sounds spiteful. It wasn't spiteful, it was just, a friend that I'd made in primary school who played football, we joined a team together, and then she left very soon on to go to the slightly better version of, like, the town's football, like the town's football team, and I was like, oh, do you think maybe I could come for practice? And she's like, no, you need to stay with this team. And I was like, very unsure of myself, and I'd be like, okay. And then if you fast forward maybe 3 or 4 years, and we're both still playing for the respective teams, and we're sort of grown out of contact a bit, but we're in a semi-final against her team, and it got to penalties, and I was in goal, and I did my very first dive to save her penalty shootout, which got us through into the final, and it was just a moment of like, so I wasn't allowed to join your fancy good team, but I still saved your penalty. I have no ill feelings now, but at the time I was like, that was a nice moment.
No, that's great. It's practically cinematic.
Yeah, and for it to be a dive as well, I was just like,
You're a good goalie. Even though it's not what you want to be doing. Sorry. I feel like now I'm like the weird person coming in being like, hey, we considered doing a goalie again? But I would never.
I never told the team that I used to do goal. Just said when we put in goal.
That's a very fair thing to do.
I'm not very loud on the pitch, and I feel like you need to shout to be a goalie, and I don't want to shout.
That's fair enough. I think I was kind of shocked when I talked with Frank to find out that he was a goalie. So I was like, you're the first person I've talked to and you're a goalie.
No one's a goalie. Yeah.
And indeed, since then, nobody has been a goalie. Where do we find the goalies? This is why I'm going to stick with Frank, because we always have a goalie if we have Frank with us. No, also because he's lovely. It's a little bit similar to some things that we already were saying, but like, why do you think that other queer and trans people should get into football as propaganda?
Because it's good, and because there's an upcoming scene of people playing. I think it will hopefully continue to the process of feeling like something people can do, and because there's more open teams popping up like Steel Athletic, it's a really good time to start playing football and start getting involved, even if you've never played before. I think mixed ability, mixed gender, really good. Yeah, good to meet people. A lot of people, especially in like your adult years, I have a lot of people saying to me like, oh, it's really difficult to make friends as an adult. And I'll be like, oh, just join a football team, just join a sports team. And then there's lots of people and you'll probably eventually make friends, or at least you'll have a social time.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, especially with trans people, considering the numbers that Gendered Intelligence put out about how many trans people are not as active as is healthy, I'm like, I get why not, but trust me, if you find the right space, it's...
Yeah, if you find something you enjoy and it's comfortable for you to be in that space, I think lots more people would. Yeah.
Because I don't think I asked you that. Like, what is it that you really enjoy specifically about Steel Athletics as a team?
I like how friendly everybody is there, and they will, at least from my perspective, chat to you. Like, it feels very, you're not just turning up and playing, like they'll make sure that you're included in it, and that goes for off the pitch and on the pitch as well. And yeah, nobody takes it super seriously. It's all very like, we're here only to have fun. We're not here to show off, and we're not here to slam each other around on the pitch and that. We're just here to like get together and play. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have? Sorry, I know that you already gave me an anecdote, and it was excellent. I'm gonna just let you know that I very much enjoyed that. Do you have like a favourite memory of playing with Steel Athletics? I know you've only played with them for a year and a half, but
I don't know. It's always really nice. Not an anecdote of playing.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. I don't know. To be honest, no, I'm cheating as well, because I was like, I only asked for one anecdote, but I was just like, oh yes, I'm now that you've talked really nicely about this team on why I feel like I should put the
Well, yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? It would round it off nice if there was a nice anecdote from that team.
You're all good. So I keep calling it propaganda, and I'm like, that sounds really loaded, but I just mean like, it's nice when somebody's found an actual great team, because I think that there's also part of this being like, I don't know, in this case, hey, everybody in Sheffield, here's a really nice team.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically the only reason for it. But yeah, you're all good. Didn't want to put you on the spot. Cool. I mean, we're basically at the end. But is there anything that you are like, oh, I really wish that we had gotten into this, or that I've been able to mention that this thing happened, or something? And if not, is there anything that you would like to round off with as a thought about, like, why it's great for trans people to be playing sport?
Yeah, I think it would be good if teams had an existing plan or protocol of what to do if a player comes out, because I was lucky enough when I came out, when I was playing for a women's team, that they were very open and very like, oh, we don't know a huge deal about this, but we'll totally like make sure it like people aren't misjudging you in the team, and like if you want us to talk to the referees, we will. Like, they were very open with it, but I feel like it was also quite a unique team in of itself. Not necessarily like what all teams would be like, and I feel like other people might not have had the same sort of experience, and having like teams that know what the FA rulings are on stuff, so you're not just there having to educate or like feel like it's this whole protocol, and having teams that will challenge the rulings as well, because often you'll have more power in numbers. So if everybody that was playing in a league got together and tried to challenge it across the country, like, and did that every year, you see more change. That was something I wanted to mention, that there should be like more of an expectation that trans people exist, rather than it being a sudden shock when it inevitably happens, because I think that puts people off. And there was teams that I played for where I stopped going, and then I was too scared to go back, and not because as individuals they were like, I didn't think they'd be accepting, it's just because it felt like transitioning was such a big thing that I didn't want people to just be a bit weird about it, in a nice way as well, in a well-meaning way. I was just like, oh, this is too much, I'm just gonna... Whereas if everyone sort of already had the plan in place and already, it would just feel way more comfortable. And then...
It would probably also, sorry, I know that you're looking at your notes, but like it would probably also like, if they're, I mean, it was a little bit what you already said, but like if they're being proactive rather than reactive, I imagine it would also change how they maybe look at the sport as a whole. And because what you were saying, like if they challenge the FA on that, like on a grassroots level as well, like,
for sure.
I think that's probably where a lot of the initial change is currently happening. But yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And I imagine that just because sports and trans people is in the media a lot currently, that I guess a lot of teams might have started doing that thinking now, but it certainly wasn't the case as much like 5 or 10 years ago. But perhaps they're doing it now, and perhaps it's more normal to be thinking that. I'm not sure. And just there needs to be a big like societal shift in sport, because you can have your team be very nice and open, welcoming and stuff, but you've still got to play other teams, and you still have to interact with other referees and other coaches and other like everybody else involved in the sport if you're playing like something, especially league football. And until that changes, there's always going to be like a feeling of like wariness, I think, and like potential opposition to you even playing. So that needs to change really as well. But yeah, people should play.
No, that's
people should play.
People should play. Sorry. No, that's just a very good. It's just a very good point. People should play. Yeah, I basically am just agreeing with what you're saying. And it's a strange one, because I'm like, the more people I talk to, the more I'm like, oh, okay, there's trans players, there's also trans coaches and referees. I mean, Lucy Clark is currently super the face, for better or for worse for her, of I guess trans inclusion of football in the UK, and there was that match on transgender visibility, which Frank was at.
Yeah, that's very cool.
It's actually a conversation about Frank. I'll let him know. I'll just be like, Frank, I had a conversation about you, and also other things. I can't remember where I was going with this point, but it does seem like things maybe are changing in these last few years. And I'm interested as well, because obviously you've been kind of in various different ways, you've been like in a space to be able to see it, I think. I mean, more so than me, because I've been jumping from country to country and place to place, so I'm kind of like here very interested in, because like you're based in the north. You've been based in the north your whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've played football in the north your whole life.
Yeah.
So it is kind of heartening to hear that you seem to think that there is something happening.
For sure. It's really good. And if I would have loved to have these spaces 10 years ago, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's good.
I'm very happy for the young trans people. I say that like we're not, like we're ancient.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
We're done.
Yeah, cool.
You're happy with everything that you wrote down?
Yeah, I don't think there's not anything else.
Cool. Because I don't want to have you feel like, oh man, this thing was so cool and they didn't even ask me.
That anecdote from Steel Athletic.
It's gonna be stuck in your head now. I'm sorry. I feel
Next time I go, I'll be like, come on everybody, we need to make an anecdote